Today we're going to look at all the steps involved in casting a bronze sculpture. But first, what is bronze anyway? Bronze is an alloy or mixture of the metals copper and tin. It's usually around 90% copper and 10% tin, but this can differ slightly, and occasionally other elements such as zinc or even gold can be found in bronze. What makes bronze so special? Bronze is stronger than copper itself, so tools, weapons, and sculptures can be made larger and more durable with bronze than with copper alone. There's even a time period called the Bronze Age, which was a stage of cultural development when bronze production was the most important technological achievement. Different cultures entered the Bronze Age at different times. In the Aegean Islands between Greece and Turkey, it began around 3200 BCE, while in China, closer to about 2000 BCE, and even later in England, around 1600 BCE. During the Bronze Age, the most valuable and useful tools, weapons, and other objects tended to be made out of bronze instead of softer metals like copper or other materials like stone. The Bronze Age in Europe and Asia came to an end when craftsmen learned to make objects out of iron, a metal even harder and harder to work than bronze. Although bronze was still a favorite metal for sculpture, we even make sculptures out of it today. Here we are in the Greek and Roman galleries, and while we have quite a few bronze objects, most are fairly small and date to later than the Bronze Age. Many bronzes don't survive from antiquity because of one of the most important qualities of bronze. It can be recycled. That means you can take a bronze object, melt it down, and make a new bronze object. The work we are going to look at today dates to the time of the Roman Empire, more specifically the 2nd century, so sometime between about 100 and 199. So that's over 1800 years ago, and it would have been made by essentially the same lost wax casting process that we use today. So who do we have here, and what's all that on his head? This figure's name is Serapis, and he was a Greco-Roman god worshipped in Egypt and later the Roman Empire. The god combined features of the Egyptian gods Apis and Osiris with those of bearded Greek gods like Zeus, king of the gods, and Hades, god of the underworld. That thing on top of his head is called a modius. It's a basket that would have held grain. Okay, so why does Serapis have a basket of grain on his head? Well, it's a symbol of abundance or plenty and represents the large amount of grain Egypt was able to grow. The modius can also be a symbol of the underworld. Well, what about that bird? That bird is an eagle and was a symbol of Zeus or Jupiter, and even for the power of Rome itself. We actually think the eagle should be on the bottom of this sculpture and not on top of his head, based on other images of Serapis. We plan to examine the statue more carefully and maybe even move the eagle below to support the rest of the sculpture. A really striking feature of this sculpture is it has silver eyes. The silver eyes would have made the sculpture look more lifelike. All the bronze pieces. Next time you visit VMFA, look for bronze pieces all over the galleries.
So today we're looking at a 2nd century Roman bronze. It was brought to the conservation lab because the curator was interested in looking at whether the eagle on the top of the bronze actually belongs on the bottom section of the bronze. While experts in art history would answer those questions by looking at the style of the piece, in conservation we're specialists in materials. First of all, we look at it under the microscope to see if there's any evidence of changes such as break edges or any change in the corrosion layer. By looking at the eagle, there is a broken piece at the top, so there probably was another piece extending off of the top of the eagle, and possibly it connected to the bottom of the bust because we also see that there's another break edge in that area of the bust. Another technique we use is X-radiography, which can tell us about the interior construction of the piece. It helps us to basically see through the object. Another technique that we use is X-ray fluorescence analysis, which tells us about the elemental composition of the piece. We were able to see through analysis that the composition of the eagle on top of the head, as well as the bust, are pretty consistent. They're both copper alloys with a large percentage of lead and a small amount of tin. It's most likely that these two pieces actually were originally formed together. Even if we use all of the analytical techniques that we have available to us, it's rare that we can come to a 100% certain conclusion. But in this case, we can provide the evidence that we get from analysis to the curator and to the art history experts, and they can work to build a case as to whether they believe the eagle does belong on the bottom of this piece or not.